Good morning and welcome to Sunday School at Cedar Lane United Methodist Church. I'm Danny Bryant, your teacher for today. We will be reading from Habakkuk chapter 2, verses 1 through 5. Some might ask, Habak who? And I wouldn't blame you. His book is only 3 chapters. He is one of the 12 minor prophets in the Bible, and they are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. They're called the minor prophets because their books are shorter in length than, say, Daniel or Isaiah, but they are not of less importance. As we will see later, Habakkuk is quoted in the New Testament. As a reminder, this is the last lesson in which we are exploring examples of how people lived their lives by faith. In our study today, Habakkuk is about learning to wait on God. What is known about this man, Habakkuk? Simply put, next to nothing. His name is mentioned twice in the Bible, both times in the book that bears his name, chapter 1, verse 1, and chapter 3, verse 1. No other personal details are available. We don't know where he was from, if he was married, but there is a clue in his conversation with God as to when he lived. God tells him that he, God, is going to raise up the Babylonians to punish Judah for their sins. Future tense. That's important. If we know when Babylon became a power, we then have an idea of when Habakkuk lived. Our author tells us that the Babylonians became a regional superpower after they defeated the Assyrians and the Egyptians at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. After that battle, Judah became a vassal of Babylon and experienced a series of deportations in 605, 594, and 586, when Judah was taken into captivity. You can read about Judah's king Josiah's role in the Battle of Carchemish in 2 Chronicles 35, verses 20 through 27. It actually cost him his life. We know Jeremiah ministered between 626 and 586 BC. All of that being said, we can surmise that Habakkuk and Jeremiah were contemporaries. Joel and Obadiah may also have been contemporaries, according to the NIV Study Bible. What about the book? For convenience, the translators have divided it into 3 chapters. Not very long when compared to Isaiah's 66 chapters or Jeremiah's 52 chapters. It is different than the other prophets' books in that it never addresses Israel. Kind of like Esther never contains the name of God in it. Habakkuk's book is a conversation between the prophet and God. Habakkuk makes 2 complaints, and God answers both. It's a surprise. The complaints and answers comprise chapters 1 and 2. Then Habakkuk prays in chapter 3. I would like to read you the end of his prayer. I think you will find it familiar. Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, Though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. Isn't it amazing that Habakkuk chooses to rejoice and be joyful even in times of want? His steadfastness in faith in those dangerous times was because God enabled him. God also enables us to rejoice and be joyful as we face our own adversities. My question is, are we in honest conversation with God like Habakkuk? What was his first issue with God? He complained about God not hearing his cry for help and giving him an answer in deliverance. Well, when he did get the answer, he didn't get the answer he expected. Ever had that happen in your own prayers? The Lord's answer is that he is raising up the Babylonians to punish Judah. What? How is it that the God who cannot look upon evil, who cannot tolerate wrong, can use the wicked to punish a people that are more righteous than they are? Habakkuk then proceeded to describe how evil the Babylonians were, destroying nations without mercy. What a place to start our lesson. Habakkuk 2, verse 1. I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me and what answer I am to give to this complaint. God's answer to his first complaint confused him. He wants to understand how God can do what he said he is going to do. How can he explain God's actions to Israel? I think one of the things that we need to understand is the role of the prophet in that time, and especially in the spiritual life of the people of Israel. Their role was like that of a watchman who stood on a wall or a rampart or in a tower to keep lookout. He reported what he saw to the people below who were going about their daily lives. Prophets kept watch to tell God's people what God was about to do. For lack of a better phrase, good or bad, blessing or cursing, it was his responsibility to report. So Habakkuk took his place on the rampart to wait for God's reply. He doesn't know how long it will take, but he is committed to staying as long as it took. He will keep watch. As our author puts it, he wasn't willing merely to toss his prayer to heaven and then go about his daily tasks. We need to understand that God held him literally responsible for the lives of God's people. Whether the news was good or bad, we see this in both Isaiah and Ezekiel, where God tells them that if they don't warn the people's blood will be on the prophet's head. Habakkuk was focused and did not want to miss the answer. Habakkuk 2 and verses 2 and 3. Then the Lord replied, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets so that a herald may run with it. For the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. God does answer, but we don't get the privilege of knowing what the real revelation was. We can, however, notice a couple of things in this passage. He was told to write it on a tablet. Most likely, this was a stone tablet or possibly a metal tablet. If the information was of a temporary nature, it would have been written on a potsherd or a wax tablet, something that would be thrown away, kind of like the scraps of paper we use to write ourselves notes. Detailed letters were written on papyrus or parchment. Papyrus is a type of paper made from the pith of the papyrus reed. Parchment is made from leather skins. The sheets of skins could be sewn together to make a scroll, and those usually would be no longer than 30 feet just because of the sheer weight of the thing. Later, the church would use parchment in the codex or book form. There were square pieces of parchment that was sewn down the middle in what we think of as a book form. You could write on both sides. To us, it just seems smart, probably. Certainly saves money. You can write on both sides instead of just one. This tablet would have been engraved, not written with ink of some sort. Ink could have been covered with more ink. An engraved stone tablet was permanent. Without telephones, text, or email, a man running from village to village with the tablet was the fastest way to disseminate the information. I don't know about you, but what God says next is the hardest part for me. Wait. It will happen, and it will not delay. Wait for it. Most of us don't know it, but some providers allow us to schedule when an email is sent. It sits in the outbox until the appointed time. So it was with the revelation God gave to Habakkuk. Of which end did it speak? The end of Israel or the end of time? We don't know. But we do understand from this that God's word is true and will come to pass. And it will occur exactly when it's supposed to. We are to wait for it. Habakkuk 2, verses 4 through 5. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright. The righteous person will live by his faithfulness. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never rests. Because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied, he gathers to himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. I'm going to take what we would call verse 4b, that's first one middle section, out. Read it again. See, the enemy is puffed up. His desires are not upright. Indeed, wine betrays him. He is arrogant and never at rest, because he is as greedy as the grave, and like death is never satisfied. He gathers himself all the nations and takes captive all the peoples. God saw just how much pride and arrogance the Babylonians had. Their military might allowed them to conquer more and more nations. God compared their greed to the grave and death, neither of which has ever said, enough people have died, enough people have been buried. Likewise, Babylon was never satisfied. It always wanted more. So they took nations and peoples in their greed. Pride and arrogance are dangerous. God hates them because they deny him. They always say that mankind can do things on our own without God. Pride and arrogance were part of the reason Judah was being punished. The kings had become arrogant. Even the good king, Uzziah, became prideful and tried to offer incense before the Lord on his own without a priest. As he raged at the priests who were trying to stop him, leprosy broke out on his forehead. He lived the rest of his life in isolation while his son ran the country. In contrast to the prideful and the arrogant, but the righteous person will live by his faithfulness or faith. When you look up this word faithfulness in Strong's Concordance, the definition is given as firmness, steadfastness, fidelity. Let's consider a couple of verses out of the Psalms and Isaiah. Psalm 51:10, create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Same word. Isaiah 23:6, you will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they trust in you. These verses are talking about those who have made up their hearts and minds to follow God, to do as he asks, even when things are tough. Faithfulness and steadfastness are why Habakkuk was able to say in verse 19, the sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. We saw you Paul quoting Habakkuk in Romans 1:17, Galatians 3:11, and in Hebrews 10:37 through 38. I'm just going to read one of them. Romans 1:17, for in the gospel, the righteousness of God is revealed. The righteousness that is by faith from first to last, just as it is written, the righteous will live by faith. Our author summarized this in sort of an interesting way, sort of bullet points, which I want to read. This is his conclusion. Question 1. Why do you, O God, tolerate the sins of your people? Response. Don't worry about it. I'm sending the Babylonians to punish them. Question 2. How is it fair to use the less righteous to punish the more righteous? Response 2. Don't worry about it. The Babylonians will get theirs too. God's ending of the discussion? Be quiet. I kind of like what Psalm 46:10 says, just a little better than that. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. We can trust the one who created us to do what is right. He has promised to care for us, to walk with us, to never leave us or forsake us. He sent Jesus to show us just how much he loves us and to show us just how much he desires for us to walk with him, now through eternity. We can trust him with our lives. Thank you for being with us today. We hope you have a great week and will join us again next week. God bless.